Make every night a wonderful journey, no matter where you are. Good night, sweet dreams. The first story, Scarecrow Nightmare. When I was very young, around 6 years old, I used to dream of the most disturbing shit ever. The worst one would be this recurring dream I always had back then. It was always associated with this creepy shit Scarecrow that the old lady next door always had on her porch. It would sit on a rocking chair all the time, looking like it was always glaring outside at any passerby. I had no idea why she always had that stupid Scarecrow out there. After all, we all lived in the city. For Pete's sake, it would be there all year. So it wasn't like some sort of Halloween decoration, although it would have been a good one. In the dream, everything would seem normal at first. The sun would be shining brightly, and everyone seemed happy. It would only take a dark turn when I walked by the neighbor's house. I would get this strong feeling of being watched, and every time I would turn around to see that Scarecrow glare at me, then it would start to move. Seeing it move would startle me enough that I would run back into my house. I thought I would be safe back in my own house, but I wasn't. It was eerily quiet in the house, and I went looking for my parents and my older brother. I would find my mother in the bathtub, with her face distorted in a silent scream. Her eyes were graved out, blood running down like tears. In my parents' bedroom, my dad was cut up in a dozen pieces. Frightened, I ran to my big brother's room, but he was nowhere to be seen. I go to my bedroom, because that's usually the place where I felt the safest at. The Scarecrow is there, waiting for me with a bloody butcher knife. He grins at me, and maggots spill forth as he starts speaking. There is a foul smell, like decaying meat. Hello, pretty little girl, let us play together. I really don't want to play with him at all. Not after what he did to my whole family. I started running out of the house, towards my friend's home. The Scarecrow is behind me, always following. My best friend Lisa lets me into the house, locking the door behind her. She asks me what is wrong, and I tell her what went on at my house. She became frightened too, so we go ask her parents to call the cops only. They're nowhere to be seen. It was as if they just literally disappeared into thin air. So we run to the house of our other best friend, Allison as the same thing Lisa did earlier. That is, letting us into her house and then asking what was going on. So we recap things for her again. As we were recapping things for her, the Scarecrow breaks down the door. He sees all three of us together, and his decaying face suddenly had this creepy, perverted smile. Oh, this must be my lucky day. 3 cute girls all together, waiting for me. That doesn't happen often. So all 3 of us run, and for some reason we suddenly end up at school. We ray running up the stairs to our classroom, but the Scarecrow is on top of the stairs, waiting for us. It starts to dawn on me that it would be useless for me to run. He would always be there, no matter where I ran to. I would never be able to outrun him, but I figure my 2 best friends could outrun him and escape this nightmare. So I decide to become the sacrifice, so that they might get away. So I stand there calmly while my 2 friends run down the stairs, leaving me behind. The Scarecrow notices this behavior of mine, and his eerie grin widens. He raises the knife, and then starts systematically cutting away my clothes, and also leaving small cuts on my body in the process. I always wake up at this point. The dreams finally stopped when the police showed up at my next-door neighbor's house. I remember the day clearly. The sirens were all blaring, An entire neighborhood was outside watching the policeman put that scarecrow into a body bag. The old lady was arrested for some reason and put into the back of the police car. I didn't really know what was going on then. There is also another memory I recall, which probably took place weeks later or something. It was a memory of my mom talking with her neighborhood friends, gossiping about that old lady and the creepy scarecrow. Hey, you know that scarecrow? Her husband. Did you find out why she did it? Well, apparently, she found out that her husband loved little girls a little too much. If you get my drift, apparently he was doing things with their daughter, and that's why their daughter committed suicide many years ago. This was years before they moved here. You see, she eventually found highly graphic pictures of it as proof. She just went crazy and made him into that scarecrow. Wow, I don't blame her at all. I would want to kill anybody who would do that to my little girl too. But it does creep me out. Jeez. I shudder to think of what would have happened if my children wanted to hang out at that place. Thank God they're never near there. Yeah. My children never liked walking by that house for some reason. They never actually met the couple personally before, so it's not like they knew the old man. I suppose children just have a sixth sense for this sort of thing sometimes. That was the snippet of the conversation that stood out the most in my memory from the events back then. I didn't really understand what happened back then. As seeing, I was too young to comprehend things like death, much less pedophilia. But looking back at those memories when you're now old enough to understand, well, it can be kind of chilling. I was glad the constant nightmare stopped, but I've developed a strong phobia of scarecrows ever since then. The second story, Nightlight. When I was 9 years old, I had a dream about a cat that was running loose in my house. The dream was more humorous than anything, even though it was very dark in the dream, with the hallway in my house only being lit by a small nightlight. The dream was fun because I was trying to catch this cat. It was too dark to see the cat well, but I eventually cornered it in the hall and tried to grab it. It seemed to have just stopped entirely, right in front of the nightlight in my hallway. When I picked it up to look at it, I immediately woke up. I was covered in blood. It was on my shirt, pillow, sheets, and hands apparently. I had a nosebleed while I was asleep, and it had run down my pillow onto my clothes. Because I was lying on my side, I ran to the bathroom and grabbed some toilet paper and held it to my nose, trying to get the blood to clot. I had been used to nosebleed throughout my life. My dad was still asleep, and it was for him, so I didn't want to bother him. It was a full hour before my nose quit bleeding. I was pretty lightheaded, but I started getting ready for school, because it was too late to go back to sleep. During that school day, I kept thinking about that cat, because something about that dream was starting to make me feel uneasy. I kept trying to remember what the cat looked like, because I knew for a fact from what I could see in my dream, it wasn't one of my cats I had for at the time. It wasn't until my dad picked me up from school that I got worried. He told me that one of our cats, Ted, had died. My mother would get home around 8, and because she worked night shift, she didn't have to work the next night, so she decided to stay up for a while. She was holding Ted and watching TV. When she decided to go upstairs and lay down, Ted got up first and ran up the steps. She followed up behind him until she hit the top of the steps and noticed he was lying perfectly still in the hallway. right under the nightlight. When I heard that point in the story, I started crying. I was really scared at this point, but my dad just thought I was sad that the cat had died. While I was sad, I was more disturbed that the cat in my dream quit moving where my cat had died. That night I had trouble sleeping. It was nearly 1, and before I finally managed to get myself calmed down to the point where I could see, it was at that point that I had a dream with nearly the same environment as the previous one. It was the upstairs of my house, but I was the only one there, and it was completely dark, except for the nightlight in the hallway. Lying under the nightlight was the cat from the previous dream. This time, however, I got a perfect look at it. It had the face of what I can only describe as looking like a barn owl. It was covered in completely sleek silver-colored fur, and most peculiar, it only had one legal of the other legs, but the back left leg seemed to just not be part of it. It stood up on its one leg and opened its mouth to reveal a pair of fangs larger than anything I had ever witnessed. Its mouth had opened to a point that was truly shocking. Then I woke up. Although this deeply scared me at the time, I had no other instances of this cat appearing in my dreams. It was 10 years' time, and in that time my dad died of leukemia. 2 of my other cats had died, and we had gained 3 new cats. My mom takes in cats like she takes in flies, so my mom was out for cats once again. One day, I came home on a visit from college to do some laundry. My mom had already left for work. I hit the top of the steps to go to the washing machine, and then my heart sank. My oldest cat, Shaft, was lying in the hallway on his side with his eyes wide open. His mouth was stretched open further than any other cat I had seen, except for that was the fact that he was laying under that same nightlight that Ted had died under. I was freaked out, so I grabbed him in some towels and dug a hole for him in our backyard and buried him. I called my mom and told her that I had found Shaft dead. I explained the way I had found him, and she told me he had probably had an aneurysm as well. I took the nightlight and told her later that I had accidentally dropped something and it broke it. I didn't sleep for 2 days after that. I was seriously too freaked out to sleep in my mom's house. I drove back to my apartment, even though I was tired enough that I could have run off the road and died, and I decided to go to sleep. Then I had a dream. I was back in the same place as all of the other dreams. I was in my room. I was a kid again, and that nightlight was on. I looked into the hallway, and once again that cat was there. This time, however, it wasn't missing 3 legs. The disturbing thing was that the 3 legs it was previously missing were there, and were black, the same color as my cat, Shaft. Once again it stood up, but this time I didn't wake up. It opened its mouth like it did before, but then it rose up on its hind legs. With its mouth all the way open, it looked directly at me and spoke without moving its mouth at all. "Thank you for bringing me with you." Then I woke up. It has been less than a week since this happened, so I'm kinda freaked out. I can only imagine that it was talking about the nightlight. I've left the nightlight in my bag since I brought it home. The 3rd story, Jalua Cultus. There is a story from long ago, one which many governments have tried so desperately to hide in fog and delusion for our protection. I fear the story has corrupted my outlook on life and that my life is at risk. We all know how painful our government's appetite for power is. Those of us who live on land so tainted from war and blood. But how far were they really willing to go to ensure victory? In WW2, the Allies were marching on Hitler's doorsteps, and he was becoming desperate. As the Allies began to near Berlin, he put Project Cosmic Taint into action. A troop of 15 Nazi soldiers were sent to an uncharted island in the middle of the Atlantic Gap. The commanding officer, Arnold Marcel, was sent to look for a book of great power, known to Hitler only as Das Buch der Titan. Arnold was angry that he was sent to retrieve a book whispered of in myths. He was also terrified of the consequences of failing. After 3 days, a scout reported to the beach camp of a small ruin near the center of the island. With markings inscribed on the walls, Arnold sent a scouting party of 3, 2 armed with Lugers and 1 with the NG-42, to investigate the ruins. After 13 hours, 2 of the men ran back to camp, screaming gibberish of horror before they could be questioned. They committed suicide. One by a combat knife across his throat and the other by a Luger shot to his temple. Arnold reluctantly took his remaining 11 men, not including him, who would make 12, and went to the ruins, armed with the finest equipment Germany could supply. As they reached the entrance, night had fallen and rain had drenched them. Thunder, unfortunately, had hidden the sound of footsteps in the leaves. When they went inside, they were greeted by carvings of strange beings and stains of a red liquid on the floor. They set up camp and scouted the ruins. When they came back to the camp, 3 men were missing an hour later. Their screeches of agony echoed through the vast halls of the ruins. When they awoke after a horrible night's sleep, the watch was gone, and only Arnold and 3 remaining men were there. One was mumbling about blood. They decided to leave, but unfortunately for them, the outside of the ruins had unearthly screeches from the bushes and shadows of humanoid creatures roaming. They were stuck in the ruins. When they ventured further in what they were calling a hollow effort, they came across him, and in blood-stained robes, laughing insane croaks from a scarred face. They were about to leave him, when Arnold saw him carrying a book, and killed the man as they took it. They turned to see 34 men in robes, murmuring of great ones and sharpening bloody knives on bones. One man cutting his leg open and licking the blood. They knocked out Arnold, and when he awoke, he looked to see his sacrificed troop on one side, and to men being eaten by strange creatures. He tried to move, but he was tied to an altar as the man in robes neared and put his knife to Arnold Merkel's throat. The last words he heard were PHNGLU, I am GLWN8FH, Jaluha Rilh W, W Jill Self H Tagen.